E-brain is watching. May actually be down to 6.5. Today. Yeah. So I'll be
Okay.
there.
Do you turn off
Keep
the
the
camera?
daylight eyes on the 3D stick. You know how that is.
Oh, the
Yeah.
metformin is what's.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes.
Feels a little.
Shoot, forget.
Sugar.
But you can't have it yet. We're gonna have to eat. That comes the big. Doing good there.
Hmm.
I'm still getting old. Well. Much better.
Hold on, everybody.
No. When I had the flu. Oh.
There we go.
Sleep did better than the flu.
For almost a week.
Okay.
Then I did good for 2 days. And then those couple of days, I think I'm gonna- but I'm feeling a lot better. Oh, good, the brain's big, I can see it. Oh, correct.
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, man.
It was wonderful.
Little buddy. Okay. Almost at that.
Worked with, but
Yeah, it's one of our neighbors. They have a.
Really?
Yeah, and she walks the dog and the dog.
Hi, everybody. We are back in the book of Revelation.
Yeah.
So. Today we are in Revelation 14. Revelation chapter 14. Last class, we went through chapter 13, talked about the two beasts that the dragon summons out of the sea and out of the earth. We talked about how those are identified as the Roman Empire and then as the sort of political religious propaganda machine that was in the Roman Empire to strengthen the emperor's authority in the empire. And we talked about the mark of the beast, how it's not like a nebulous thing that you may or may not identify in the present day. It's a specific thing that means a specific person's name. And we talked about how the sort of number code that it is playing with.
Gematria.
Gematria. Hey,
There you go, John.
nice. I took notes. Look at that. I see that all of them are highlighted. Yes, it was gematria, an example of gematria, numerical values assigned to numbers, and the number came out to the title and name Caesar Nero, or Caesar Neron if you included the removable N at the end of the name, which is something that you can do in Hebrew.
Because of none, Hebrew equivalent to N.
Yes, noon, Hebrew equivalent to
Noon, I'm sorry.
Yep. So we are in the next chapter. And who wants to read this first 5 verses for us?
I'll do it. Revelation 14, 1 through 5. Then I looked, and behold, on Mount Zion stood the Lamb, and with him 144,000 who have his name and his father's name written on their foreheads. And I heard a voice from heaven like the roar of many waters and like the sound of loud thunder. The voice I heard was like the sound of harpists playing on their harps. And they are singing a new song before the throne and before the 4 living creatures and before the elders. No one could learn that song except the 144,000 who have been redeemed from the earth. It is these who have not defiled themselves with women, for they are virgins. It is these who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These have been redeemed from mankind as first fruits for God and the Lamb, and in their mouth no lie was found, for they are blameless.
All right. So, we have the 144,000 reappearing in the Revelation. Previously in chapter 7, the 144,000 came up as an imagery for those who are redeemed in Christ. There's a lot of people who interpret it as specifically being people from the nation of Israel, overlooking the fact that there's a lot of symbolism going on, even with the numbers themselves. Like it is a very minority of groups that believe that there are only going to be 144,000, literally 144,000 people in heaven. One of those being what prominent group?
Like Jehovah's Witnesses.
The Jehovah's Witnesses. Yep, the witnesses believe that there are only going to be 144,000. And through the years, they have on again, off again said, we have all the roster filled out. And then they predict that the end of the world is going to come. And then that year passes and they say, well, I guess there's still room in the 144,000. We were wrong. So that's the sort of thing that happens with every group that says they are predicting when the end of the world is going to happen. It comes and it goes, and they say, well, maybe we miscalculated. Or they say, we were meaning it in a spiritual sense. So here we have the 144,000, and from chapter 7, we understand that that is not a literal 144,000 people. The number 12 has a significance of sort of the God's design of a group of people, and the 1,000 is significant in that it's a large number, right? 1,000 people. This is all symbolic meaning being attached to numbers, and Revelation, a book of symbols, is playing heavily into it. And we know that it's more than 144,000 because the number of them is what John hears when the group is introduced. And then he turns around and sees the group, and he says it is an innumerable multitude from every nation on earth that could not possibly be counted. So it's not literally 144,000. It's also not Israelites. There's lots of groups that interpret it as being Israelites, the Jews, and that's not what Revelation is going for. They're using Israel as the Old Testament archetype of God's people. And it's a symbol that's being expanded outward to include all of God's people, as we see here. The 144,000, their identity is further clarified. They have the name of the Lamb's father on their forehead. You guys remember that from chapter 7? They all get their name stamped, the name of God stamped on their forehead, and if they are included in that number, they do not perish. Sounds pretty important to have the name on it. So that is the same group, just to further cement that, from chapter 7. They are exclusively privy to what is called a new song. So they're singing a new song, and no one could learn that song except for this group who have been redeemed from the earth. What is that new song? You read ahead. Amazing Grace? Or maybe it's the Battle Hymn of the Republic. No. Well, if you read ahead into chapter 15, we have the same group of people in another scene who are singing a new song, and it's the Song of Moses and the Lamb. You know that hymn.
Yeah.
Sing the song of Moses and the Lamb. What was that? And dwell with Jesus evermore. Exactly. Yep. You ever wondered what the Song of Moses and the Lamb is? Or is it just words in a song for you? The Song of Moses is from the very end of Deuteronomy. That is what is traditionally called the Song of Moses. And Moses sort of does a summary song of the entire Old Testament, beginning with God sort of reigning in the cosmos, essentially. That is Genesis, and going all the way to when the remnant of Israel would return to the land after exile. He goes through all of those concepts in the Song of Moses. And then the Song of the Lamb would be all the stuff about Jesus, right? He's the Lamb, right? And so the Song of Moses and the Lamb shells out to be the story of the Bible, essentially. The story of God's people and God's activity redeeming humanity throughout all time. Yes,
Where in Deuteronomy is it?
that is Deuteronomy
Said towards the end.
30. Yeah, it's almost the very end. 31, 32. Let's see, 34 is the epilogue, 33 is the final blessings. So Song of Moses is 32, Deuteronomy 32. It's a very good read. I would, if you're musically inclined, see if you could put it to music. That would be fun evening.
EDM.
Put it to some EDM. Oh, no. Anyway, so moving on, these redeemed have been, these 144,000, they've been redeemed from the earth. Redeemed from the earth. Implying they are no longer on the earth. Therefore, they are, what is that implying about these 144,000?
Thinking they got taken up to heaven like, Enoch or Elijah.
Okay. Well, if we rewind back to chapter 7 again, the multitude that John sees, he asks one of the elders, who are these people? And the elders say, they are the ones who have overcome by coming through the tribulation. And there's only one way that you come through a tribulation. Not that you have escaped tribulation, but that you have, it says overcome, but how does a follower of Christ overcome when it is life-threatening tribulation?
And totally on God, through prayer, keeping his commandments, keeping the scriptures in your heart. Somebody else will be out
Being
here.
saved, they died.
They died. They died. So that's a part of it, and that's the last part of it. They perished in the tribulation, but that does not mean that they were condemned to hell. Instead, it means that since they remained faithful, they remained loyal to Christ, through that, they have overcome. So this group of people, and I think it also mentions, it doesn't mention the word overcome in this, but they are redeemed from the earth, and from chapter 7, we understand that that is, they died, but they died faithful to Christ. They died refusing to forsake Christ. Also, I believe in chapter 12, the ones who overcome the beast are described, and they are described as those who loved not their life, even to the point of death. So we are, like I've said before, in Revelation, John is talking about persecution and tribulation that these Christians were about to go through. And so there's a lot in here that is meant to encourage them that even if they die in these persecutions, that does not mean God has abandoned them, and that does not mean they have lost the battle. It means actually that their victory has been locked in. And we'll get to more of that in a little bit. So it mentions that these people have not defiled themselves with women, for they are virgins. Again, talking about heavily like symbolic stuff going on. It's not referring to actual celibacy. Throughout the Bible, it is consistently reinforced that sex within a marriage between the husband and wife is a good thing. God has made it for that, and he appreciates it within that boundary. It's a good thing, and he does not call people to like be celibate as like some higher form of spirituality. That's not exactly the Bible stance on that. What it's probably referring to is, if you go back to chapter 2, what Jesus himself said to 2 of the churches he was talking to, is that some among them were ascribing to the teachings of a guy he refers to as Balaam, and a woman he refers to as Jezebel, and their teachings, the influences that they were having on the church in those cities, was part of it promoting sexual immorality. So these 144,000, the people who are redeemed from the earth, who have overcome by remaining faithful to God even to the point of death, they're not the kind of people who do that stuff. They don't do that kind of stuff. And you could probably lump in the other half of those teachings that Jesus mentioned, which was engaging in idolatrous worship practices. They don't do that kind of stuff either. They don't cave when people pressured them to take part in that stuff. They remain strong in the Lord.
So that's the definition of virgins.
Well, you know what the definition of virgin is.
Yeah, so, but you're saying that, the relationship between a married couple is good, but they're not virgins.
Yes, but we're not talking literal terms here.
Okay.
Yeah, we're talking revelation. That's,
Virgin just means pure.
yeah, it's like purity. Yeah, and we're talking specifically with the matter of sexual immorality, which was, I don't know how much you understand of how rampant sexual immorality was in the ancient world. Yeah, like it was a religious practice, sexual immorality. So, you know, it was a big deal, and that's why the apostles harp on it so much in the Bible. It was and still is a really big deal. So these redeemed, it is these who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. This is probably John referring to the words that he himself recorded Jesus speaking. In John chapter 10, verse 27, he says, "My sheep know my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. They follow me." So it is these who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. Where he leads, I'll follow. Follow all the way. Good song. Now, he says that they are redeemed from mankind as first fruits for God and for the Lamb. First fruits for God and the Lamb is in the scope of all the book of Revelation. It's foreshadowing a section that will follow soon, in which there are the 2 harvests of earth. The Son of Man comes on the cloud and he harvests the earth, and then he harvests it a second time, and the second time is way different than the first time. The first, it's foreshadowing that I would believe that the first harvest is these people who are faithful to Christ, and then the second harvest, by implication, is the ones who are not. I thought about it a good bit. It's not likely referencing Paul's usage of first fruits from 1 Corinthians 15, where Jesus is the first fruits of the new creation. it uses the word first fruits and it's using kind of the same concept from the Old Testament as the first fruits. But matching it to here, I don't really see how the analogy would match up, so I don't think it's referring to that. But in their mouth, no lie was found, for they are blameless. They are like Christ. Right, Isaiah 53. In his lips was no deceit found. They are like Christ. Any questions on this group before we move on from them?
So all 144 were harp players,
For what?
played the harp.
They played the harp. Yep.
Okay.
They all play the harp. Better
That's
start
all I like.
practicing. Better start practicing. Now, it's interesting that you say that because that concept isn't tied to them until chapter 15. That they are the ones who are playing the harp. Yep. Did you read it? All right. Number next. Sorry, Lester, the text is a little smaller on this slide.
Thank you. I'm just pleased that I can see this much.
Okay. Who wants to read this next section for
Yeah,
us?
I was gonna give it a shot, but it's a wee tad
Well,
smaller
you
than
did
I
the last
expected.
one. You did
This
the
guy's
last-
got glasses, go ahead, Daniel.
Oh, he took his glasses off. Oh, I can't see.
Put your glasses on. Okay, I'll start, and then you follow. Then I saw another angel flying directly overhead, having an eternal gospel to proclaim to those who dwell on earth, to every nation and tribe and language and people, saying with a loud voice, go ahead, Daniel, take over.
Fear God and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea and the springs of water. Another angel, a second, followed, saying, Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, she who made all nations drink the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality. And another angel, a third, followed them, saying with a loud voice, If anyone worships the beast in its image, and receives a mark on his forehead or on his hand, he will also drink the wine of God's wrath, poured full strength into the cup of his anger. And he will be tormented with fire and sulfur in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever, and they have no rest day or night, these worshippers of the beast and its image, and whoever receives the mark of its name. Here is a call for the endurance of the saints, those who keep the commandments of God and their faith in Jesus. And I heard a voice from heaven saying, Write this, blessed are the dead who are dying in the Lord from now on. Indeed, says the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors, for their deeds follow them.
All right, so we have the proclamation of the three angels. John looks up, sees an angel flying directly overhead. That word directly overhead is the word for like the middle of the sky. So it's like a Renaissance thing. He looks up and there's the angel. What is the angel's message? In your own words. Judgment has come. So what should people do?
You're God and be faithful.
Fear God and be faithful. Yep. Saying you better fear God. Now, when the Bible says fear God or the fear of the Lord, what is that meaning? Respect. Respect. It's a good definition of it. Yeah. It's not like shaking in my boots, trembling with fear. That's not the kind of fear God wants from, like, ultimately what he wants. That is ultimately what some people will experience, right? But what he ultimately wants from people is for them to respect him and who he is, because he's not like this old man who just gives wise advice. He's also not just like your friend, your pal. He is the one who created the whole world and who created you and me and everybody in the world, and who has the authority to decide what happens to us. Deserves respect. You know, there are a lot of points in the Bible where people will say, man, I feel like God acted a little harsh. When the instance is he told someone to do something and that person just didn't do it, or he told them not to do something, that person went ahead and did it. Like Lot's wife. No, she was told when you're running and Sodom is being destroyed, don't look back. She looked back and she became a pillar of salt. She was dead. People say, man, that sounds a little harsh. I would say perhaps one should take commands from God a bit more seriously. Or you could say he sent 10 devastating plagues on Egypt because they wouldn't listen to him. That seems a little harsh. Well, who put Pharaoh in power? To whom does he owe his regime, and to whom does he owe his very life? And he's just not going to listen. Perhaps we need to pay a bit more attention and respect to the God who created us. So fear God and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea and the springs of water. The second angel, what's he talking about? Not sure. Yep.
Fall of Rome.
Yeah.
Collapse of Roman Empire.
Yeah, yep. In the New Testament, Rome is referred to as Babylon
Okay.
in more than just Revelation, right? We have Peter referring to Rome as Babylon. And so,
Where did Peter refer to Rome as Babylon?
the very end of First Peter, I believe. Yeah. Or maybe it was Second Peter. But the very end of one of his two letters. So Rome is referred to as Babylon in the Bible, and that mainly has to do with how Rome is the archetype for the super corrupted world empire in the New Testament, sort of how Babylon was the archetype of the super corrupted world empire in the Old Testament. So the name gets tacked on as a pseudonym for Rome, because it's the same sort of symbolism going on there. Not that Rome or Babylon did not exist, but they have that symbolic meaning attached to them in the Bible. So fallen is Babylon the Great, talking about Rome. Says she who made all the nations drink the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality. In a later chapter, chapter 17, Rome is going to get personified again as a harlot, as a prostitute. So sexual immorality is kind of like the theme for Rome's presentation in Revelation. But also this phrase, made all the nations drink the wine of the passion over sexual immorality, is from the book of Jeremiah, Jeremiah 51. Babylon is presented as a golden cup of wine, which she made all the nations drink. They get drunk and they go mad, and then they get destroyed because they partook of this wine from Babylon's golden cup. Sort of like guilt by proxy to the super corrupt world empire. So, you know, in the instances like with Jehoshaphat, who refused to be associated with the evil king of Israel, his life was spared because he refused to be associated with the evil king of Israel. You refuse to be associated with the ultra sinful things going on in the world, and you don't get guilt by proxy if you refuse to be associated. So, the third angel, what's the third angel saying? A little bit like what I just said.
For those who are followers of the beast.
Yeah, yeah. In other words, like tying it into what it's actually talking about. In terms of like Rome and swearing your allegiance to Rome to the extent that you will put aside God to remain loyal to Rome. That is what it's referring to as someone who worships the beast, right? Because you remember in the ancient world, especially Rome, your political life your political stance, and your religious life are intertwined. Because you have the Roman gods who are the ones who take care of Rome. And so if you're not worshiping them, you are looking very suspicious. And then you have the emperor who is deified. Actually, the whole litany of them are deified. And if you don't worship them, you are viewed with suspicion. And you have the personification goddess of Rome named Roma. Very clever naming, I know. And if you don't worship her, you are viewed with suspicion, because these all have to do with the welfare of the empire. It's politics and religion intertwined, not separation of church and state like we have nowadays. And so this concept makes a whole lot of sense of why worship is something that could get you killed. Refusing to worship in a certain way could get you killed. Now, the one who receives the mark of the beast for worshiping the beast also drinks the wine of God's wrath. I think this is the first instance of the notion of the wine of God's wrath in Revelation. So we'll talk about it. It's from Jeremiah 25. Jeremiah is given a cup or a drinking bowl. And this is like a side note, but when the Revelation talks about the bowls of God's wrath, it's referring more to the shallow drinking cups that they would have. They would be like this deep, but they'd be this wide, and you would fill it with wine. If you were like at a party, it's the kind of drink that you could pass around. So
For COVID.
before COVID, yes. Yeah, before COVID. So I would say, like, imagine the like traditional Japanese drinking cups. They're like super shallow, but they're really wide. But this is one that is big enough for two hands. That's the bowls that it's talking about. So Jeremiah in Jeremiah 25 is given one of these drinking bowls that is filled with that God says it's filled with his wrath. And Jeremiah's job is to go and prophesy against the nations. And as he goes and prophesies against the nations, he gives them the bowl and they have to drink it. And as soon as he prophesies against them, drinking becomes mandatory. If they refuse, they get forced. God forces them to drink it. So it is the notion of when a nation is, you could say, too far gone, they're forced to drink the cup of wrath. We could talk about God's wrath at another time. But his wrath is poured full strength into the cup of his anger. That word full strength is the word for like not diluted. Potent, yes, 100% potent. In the ancient world,
110 proof.
I think like 100% alcohol is 200 proof or something like that. But in the ancient world, wine, it was used as a concentrate. It wasn't drunk straight unless you were meaning to get drunk. If you drink it straight, that's the hard stuff. Because wine in the ancient world was alcoholic. However, it was used as a concentrate. It was used to purify water and make it taste good. Ancient recipes, the most accepted one was 4 parts water to 1 part wine. That was like the most accepted, and you would die before you got drunk off that stuff. That's not enough alcohol to actually get you drunk unless you have the most shriveled up liver in the world. But you know, other recipes are even more conservative with 20 parts water to 1 part wine. Like, I think it's for parties, you did 3 parts water to 1 part wine because, you know, it's a party. But for like regular everyday drinking, you would do somewhere between 4 and 20 parts water and 1 part wine. It's not for getting drunk, it's for purifying your water and making it taste good, because drinking dirty water every day is not fun. But the wine of God's wrath, full strength, no diluting it. It is like, if you earn God's wrath, you earn God's wrath. That's the notion here.
Stronger than Kool-Aid.
It's stronger, man. What's Kool-Aid now? Yeah. Stronger than Kool-Aid. All right. Final thing that he says here, write this, blessed are the dead who are dying in the Lord from now on. Indeed, says the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors, for their deeds follow them. Blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Again, it's the concept, those who are faithful to Christ, even to the point of death, they are not defeated because of death. They actually overcome, they actually win because of that death. Not that death in general is a victory, but perseverance and faithfulness to Christ, even through death, that's the victory. I heard a bell, I think it was the 5-minute bell.
Yeah.
That was the first one. Okay, so. Then I looked, and behold, a white cloud, and seated on the cloud is one like a son of man, with a golden crown on his head and a sharp sickle in his hand. And another angel came out of the temple, calling with a loud voice to him who sat on the cloud, put in your sickle and harvest, for the hour to harvest has come, for the harvest of the earth has been made ripe. So he who sat on the cloud swung his sickle across the earth, and the earth was harvested. And then another angel came out of the temple in heaven, and he too had a sharp sickle. And another angel came out from the altar. These guys are coming out of the woodworks. The angel who has authority over the fire, and he called with a loud voice to the one who had the sharp sickle, put in your sickle and gather the clusters from the vine of the earth, for its grapes have ripened. So the angel swung his sickle across the earth and gathered the grape harvest of the earth and threw it into the winepress of the wrath of the great God. Some translations say the great wrath of God, but actually grammatically, it's the wrath of the great God. Thought that was interesting. And the winepress was trodden outside the city, and blood flowed from the winepress as high as the bridle of the horses for 1,600 stadia. Stadia is a unit of measurement. I don't really think the exact length of it really matters for the discussion. Maybe 1,600 matters. I couldn't really find anything on that. Yes.
In the book I read, the stadia came out to be a furlong, which is the length of a horse.
So the length of
Right.
1,600
If
horses.
you're into horse racing, when they're calling it, they call the horse a furlong.
Oh.
The distance between the
Distance
first and
between.
second horses and the third horses. But the book that I was reading, the stadia came out to be furlong, which is.
About the length of a horse.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Use anything but the metric system.
Use anything but the metric system. Yeah. So who is the Son of Man?
I would think Jesus Christ.
Yeah, Daniel chapter 7, it's the Messiah, it's the messianic figure. He comes with a sharp sickle in his hand. What's a sickle used for? Harvesting what?
Cutting the leaf,
Cutting.
Cutting the wheat. You know what it's not used for?
collecting grapes.
Collecting grapes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah, he's not collecting literal grapes here, is he? So the first harvest, it's not mentioned what he's harvesting, so it's implied that it's grain. Does that make sense? Like, what else do you harvest? What's the parable? Okay, yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Jesus uses the parables involving wheat and grain for harvesting as God's people, and he harvests them.
Sifting out the shaft.
Sifting out the shaft, yeah, okay, yeah. So we already talked about what the first harvest means. It was foreshadowed with the 144,000 being the first fruits, the first harvest. But how about the second one? We get this imagery of them being grapes. We already had the wine of God's wrath. So grapes, wine. Here we have the clusters being taken out of the city and trodden in the winepress, specifically of God's wrath. In two places in the Old Testament, Lamentations chapter 1, verse 15, Judah is described as a cluster of grapes that God has taken out and trodden in the winepress. It's a very graphic image. the juice from the grapes being analogous to blood, because that's exactly what it looks like, right? And in, last thing I'm gonna mention. It is in Isaiah 63, verse 3, the Lord is seen coming into the scene, and he has the stained on his clothes, the juice from the grapes stained red, and Isaiah asks him, what's with the stains on your clothes, essentially? And he says, I just came in from treading out the nations in the winepress of my wrath. So it's revealed that the stains is not from grape juice, it's from the blood of the nations that he's judged in this instance. I believe that instance is talking about him judging Edom and the neighboring city-states of Edom who participated in the siege on Jerusalem and killed a lot of God's people because of that. That was their judgment scene. And it's depicted as God treading them out in a winepress as his wrath. So that, that's what that's talking about. So you have the first harvest, which is the redeemed being taken. And then you have the second harvest, which is the wicked being judged. And that matches up with just about every instance in the Bible of God's judgment on a wicked community. The God making the avenue for people who are faithful to him to be saved, and then bringing the judgment once they are saved. Think about Noah, the ark. Think about Lot and his family in Sodom and Gomorrah. You think about Jeremiah in Jerusalem. Jeremiah was one of the few from the palace who survived because he was faithful to God. And there are many other instances in the Bible of that happening. And it's always God makes the way for those who are faithful to him to be saved. And then the judgment on the wicked comes once they're saved. I guess we could also mention Passover with that too. So that is it for this class. I was hoping to get through chapter 15, but that chapter is just so dense. Chapter 15, we're going to get into the sort of prelude for the last set of 7 things in Revelation, the bowls of the wine of God's wrath. And
I thought you have, and the winepress was tried outside the city, just like Jesus was crucified outside the city of Jerusalem. Did you cover that last week? The wine was away from the temple, away from the city.
I did not cover that last week. No, I didn't.
Maybe David did, or David.
Maybe, yeah. Yeah,
To separate the sin.
Yeah,
away
the
from
sin
the
being put on
place.
the sin being put on the scapegoat, and the scapegoat is
Right,
sent out,
definitely.
and then
Yeah.
the atoning sacrifice, the blood is used to make atonement. This is all in the book of Leviticus, and then the remains of that sacrifice are handed off to a guy whose job it is to take them out, take them far away outside the city, and take them to a specified place and burn them till there's nothing left. Yeah, when a sacrifice was used for making atonement, the remains of it were taken out of the city and burned. Yep. All right, thanks.
Thanks, Grant.
Yep.